to this video. So in today's video we'll be looking at web scraping with Beautiful Soup. So before we go any further, I'd like you to like and subscribe. So let's get started. In this tutorial we're going to be web scraping this website using Beautiful Soup. And when we're done web scraping this website, we're going to extract Python jobs from this website and store it in a text file. So we're going to be using file handling in this video. So if you don't know about file handling, I have a tutorial on file handling. I'll leave it in a card at the top right corner of your screen. I found this website from a beautiful article. This is a great resource if you want to learn Beautiful Soup. I'll leave it in the description below. Let's head over to Visual Studio Code. So the first thing you need to do is to click install the Beautiful Soup 4 library and the request library. Once you hit enter, that should install it. I already have these libraries installed, so I don't need to proceed any further. We first import request, and then next thing we're going to import is the Beautiful Soup library. So from BS4 we're going to import Beautiful Soup. Now we're going to make a HTTP request. So I'm going to go with request.get, and I'm going to have a URL. I'll just head over to this website, the website containing the fake jobs, and I'm going to embed it in a string, use the string in our URL, and that's all we do for now. So this is where we use the Beautiful Soup library. So I've created a variable called soup, and I equated it to a function called Beautiful Soup. Now this function will take in two arguments. The first argument is going to be r.content. Now r.content is basically the HTML data of the website. Second argument is going to be the type of parser we'll use. Before we proceed any further, I'll want you to understand something. So if I print soup, you're going to get the entire HTML file contained in this website. If you go to any website and you right click and you click on inspect, on your top right you would see what looks like HTML code. So this HTML code is actually responsible for the website over here. When we use r.content, we're basically trying to extract the HTML data and passing it, and then that will get stored in soup. So I'm going to print soup. So you see that we get HTML data. Now this is beautiful. So this is exactly what we wanted. Now we're done with this. The next thing we're going to do is create another variable. In this variable is going to be equals to soup, and I'm going to introduce a new method called .find. The job of the .find method is to find any element that we specify in the bracket. When I come over to this website, remember we're trying to extract Python data from the job cards. You can see that as I hover through the HTML code, different parts of the code get highlighted. The parts that get highlighted are the parts that the code I am on is responsible for. So as we scroll through, when we hit this, you see how all the job cards are highlighted. So now we're looking for an ID tag. Why we're looking for an ID tag is because of this. The job of the .find method is to find a single HTML element. So I hope I'm not confusing you. And why we need an ID tag is that an ID tag is a unique reference to a HTML element. So div is a HTML element. You can see that throughout this code there are several divs. But when you see the ID attribute, like the name of this ID attribute is results container. This is the only results container you're going to find in this piece of code. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to put that in a find element. So now what this piece of code does is that it extracts all the code contained inside this element. So that is beautiful. Now I'm going to create an element called job cards, and we're going to go with soup. So it will actually be inefficient if we just use the .find method to find every single job card that will take a lot of time. So there's actually an easier method. So the name of the method is find all. This finds all the elements that correspond with the values that we put in its parentheses. So as I move through the divs inside this parent div, you can see that different parts of our job cards get highlighted. So that is very good. And it's also good that all the job cards share the same class. So this is making our work easier. So they find all. So this find all method is going to take in two arguments. So the name of the first argument is going to be div because the element is div. So the next thing we're going to use is their class. So we can't just go and type class. Remember, we're going to go with class, then underscore is going to be equals to. So I'm going to come here and look at the class name. So this div is actually part of two classes, and one of the classes is part of his column. You can use is half, but I'm going to use column, and that's what the same thing I advise you to do. So I'm going to use column. One thing you need to know is this. Anytime we use the find all method, the find all method is going to extract every single div inside the result container that has a class of column. So it's essentially going to extract all the cards. The main difference between find and find all is the way the values are stored. So when you use the find all method, your values are stored in a list. So I'm not going to print it, but assuming we print it and we want to only get the text, if we try this on job cards, we'll get an error. That's because it's in the form of a list, and you can't just use the text because it's in a list. But if we decide to iterate it for I in job cards, we decide to print I dot text, this won't give us an error. So with that being said, we're trying to extract the values from the job card. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to run a for loop. So for job in job cards, so now we're going to extract the value. The good news is that these divs are all identical. So now I'm trying to extract the title of the job, I'm trying to extract the company, I'm also trying to extract the location, and I'm also trying to extract the link to apply. Let's go ahead. First, going to start with the job title. As you see, as I move through the divs, you see that I get over here and you see that we're getting close to it. So now it's obvious it's in media, it's in this class, media left, and we're getting closer there. So now we're going to use the find method because we're trying to extract a single value. Remember, we're going to iterate, so we'll only be taking one value at a time. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to find an element starting with h2, and it's going to have a class title. It also has a class is 5, but I'm going to use title since that's a more reasonable name in my opinion, at least. So first thing we're going to use is title equals to job. Remember, because we're iterating this, we're going to be going through it one at a time. So we're going to go with h2. The next thing we're going to go with is the class name. So I'm going to go with class. Class is going to be equals to, let me check that again. So class is going to be equals to title, same as our variable name. The next thing we're going to be looking for is the name of the company. So I'm just going to close this div. So the name of the company is inside this div. So that's good. So over here you can see that this is a header. Let me zoom in. Okay, there's no way I can zoom in this. So over here you can see that we have a header tree tag. I'm just going to try and increase this. So over here you can see that we have a header tree tag, and our header 3 tag has a class subtitle, and with that we can get the name of the company. So that's beautiful. Create another variable called company, which is going to be equals to job.find. Remember, header 3, sorry about that, subtitle. Now we're trying to find the location, so, and that is definitely not in the media div. It's actually in the content div. So beautiful. You can see it's in a paragraph tag, which is in the class location. So this has made our job easier. So now this is the easy part. I just realized I made an error above here. So we're meant to put class there. I'm going to check this class one more time. Paragraph tag is class is location. This is the easy part. The next thing we're going to do is to extract the URL. So now we're going to look for the URL. So we can see that the URL for applying is in the URL for applying is in the footer element. So there are two links here. Remember, anchor tags are reference to links. So there are two links here. So we want the second link, quarter part. So we want the second anchor tag. There is no class here, so that's going to make it a little bit okay. Yeah, we have classes, but I'm not going to use the class this time. So we have a word here called apply. So we can actually use this to extract the value of the link. Just watch. So I'm going to create a variable called link job.find. We're going to go with an anchor tag, and now we're going to go with an inner variable, and its value is going to be string. So string is going to be equals to apply. Anytime you use just the string keyword like that, you make sure that it's exactly the value apply that is in between the tags. Let's extract the URL. Before we extract the URL, I want you to see this. The URL for the link is actually in an attribute called href. If you've been using HTML for a while, you understand this. So it's inside the href attribute. When we run job.find, it stores the attributes in a dictionary form. So meaning that we can use the .get method on this. When we use the .get method on that, I'm going to go with href. If we can't find href, we return none. At the beginning of this video, I told you that we're extracting Python jobs. So you can see that when we come to the website, you can see that we have things like energy engineer, legal executive. These things have nothing to do with Python, but we only want Python jobs. So how are we going to do that? First, create a variable called Python jobs. So the only way we're going to know if the jobs are Python jobs or not is to check in the title and see if there's a word containing Python. Use the .string method because none of the job cards have a value that is exactly Python. But using lambda functions, we can do that. So let's head over to it. So it's going to be very similar to this. So I'm going to copy this because remember it's in the title tag. But it's a second argument is going to be a little bit different. So we're going to go with string is equals to lambda, and lambda is going to be equals to text. Now lambda functions are anonymous functions, so this is a very short function we're writing here basically. So now we're telling Python if Python is in text dot lower, it's going to return true, and then using this, we're going to get all the Python jobs. So this lambda function in our string argument is basically telling Python, check if any of these titles contain the word Python. If it does, store it in the Python jobs variable. So now we're actually getting to the end of this. So what we're going to do is, if Python jobs is not none. Now I'll tell you why we are doing this. So not all the jobs are Python jobs, and if not all the jobs are Python jobs, and we print, and I decide to print Python job, we're just going to be getting none for the jobs that are not Python jobs. So we're using this to filter jobs that are not Python jobs. So we're basically removing them with this if statement. Right now I'm going to see how we're going to store this in a text file. So I'm going to use a context manager to save time. So with open job.txt, a second argument is going to be the right argument, as we're going to go with as f. I'm actually going to shift this to the right. So I'm just going to go with f.right. The first thing we're going to do is title. We're going to leave some space. We're going to go with title. But if we just go with title like that, we are basically returning HTML, and that won't work. That will give us an error. So we're going to go with title.text. We can even decide to use getText as a function. Title.getText plus we're going to add a new line character, and we're going to repeat this in second line. We're going to go with company, and we're going to go with company as well. The second line, going to go with location, now the last thing we're going to do is going to give them the link to apply. So apply here, and we're going to use URL. So the good thing about the URL is that we got the URL from an attribute, so we do not need the .getText method. So I'm just going to go with URL like that, and I think we are done. Hopefully we didn't get any errors. I'm going to run the code. Boom. So it's done. Let's head over and check our jobs.txt file. So you see that we get what we want, but it's a little bit scattered. So we're going to use a .strip method to solve our issue. So I'm just going back to text.py. I'm going to close this, create space. We're just going to apply the .strip method to each one of these, and hopefully that will solve our problems. So we're going to run our code again. We get an error. We added 2 double addition signs. I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to run our code again. Sorry, I'm going to get rid of that, and we're going to run our code again. So our code is done running, and hopefully all issues should be resolved by now. So you see that we get what we want. So if you want to create a little bit more space, what you could do is to go to the file and add new line characters. You could add extra new line characters, but this already takes a lot of time to load, but I've already given you all the essentials. So thank you for your time. I hope you really enjoyed this video, and I'll see you next time.